Okay, and we are live. Welcome to a new episode of All Things Xbox Podcast. Now, Logan isn't here this week. He's got some stuff going on, and if he can pop in, that'll be great. But got a cool show planned. Got a lot to talk about. And if anything, it's actually been one of the most interesting weeks for gaming news because it's less about rumors, it's more about news, and there's tons of stuff to talk about, and we'll get into that soon. Now, before we get into all the topics, which I have like 15 topics, 10 of which are main topics. But before I get into all that, I'm going to go over what I've been playing and so on. Before I get into that, actually, hope everyone's doing well. YouTube has been having some problems with live streaming, so if the delay is a bit weird when it comes to the audio, just let me know in chat, and if you're watching afterwards, well, you won't notice. Anyway, this week's been awesome for gaming. Been playing a lot of, shockingly, Death Stranding. That is a game that I never thought in a million years I'd actually give a chance. Because it's a game you can't really quantify. It's a game where people call it a FedEx simulator, a walking simulator, if you will. And I've never really had an opinion about what this game is. I've never called it a FedEx simulator or walking simulator, but you do a lot of walking in the game. And you can't call it a third-person shooter, even though it has third-person shooting mechanics. So what exactly do you call it? And whenever I talk about this game online, I keep referring to it as the exact same thing, is that it's strange. It's hard to talk about because you do things in this game which you haven't really done in other games. It's got a multiplayer component which you don't see in other games. I may have mentioned this before, but I absolutely hate crafting mechanics. I can't stand them. My brain just kind of turns off. But with Death Stranding, the beautiful part is other people make stuff and it appears in your world. And you don't have to do anything about it. So if you're one of these people that they love to crafting video games, this is going to be for you. You can make roads, highways, whatever you want, and you're going to have a lot of fun with it. But for me, I'm just in it for the adventure. And seeing people's roads pop up that I can use it's fantastic because, again, I hate crafting. There's something about it. If it's not Minecraft, my brain turns into scrambled egg, and I just can't deal with crafting mechanics. I don't know what it is. Before I continue, we have the first super chat of the day by Nick Wenland. Thank you very much for the $4.99. He says, Sudoku 1 and 2 HD is awesome. I'm happy to hear because that game looks fantastic. And I think that's probably going to be my next JRPG. I'm still playing Final Fantasy VI at the minute. And this is my first time properly playing Final Fantasy VI. And I'm absolutely loving it. The story, super interesting. I think, considering I obviously never got to play it at the time, but it feels like it was well ahead of its time. The way it's telling the story, the characters, the world. I hope that's something we see like a HD 2D remake of because I'm having so much fun with it. But Sudoku 1 or 2, that looks fantastic. I know it's kind of a remake and a remaster at the same time, but everything I've seen in that game, it looks fantastic. There's something about 2D pixel art in a 3D world that just kind of works. Or like the way they do the art in that game, and it looks phenomenal. I think it's probably going to go down as maybe one of the best JRPGs of the year, just because it's a beloved collection of games. Unfortunately, I never got to play them back in the day, and that's one of the reasons why I actually love the fact that these games are getting collections and remasters. And look, some people might say it's an old game. Why do you want to play it? But for me, I missed out on all these JRPGs. I didn't have a Super Nintendo. And, if I remember correctly, even in the early 2000s, up until 2005, I think, my local video game store would sell Super Nintendo games. But I never had one. So I'd always see these JRPGs on the shelf, not being able to play them. But now, thankfully, we get lots of ports, collections and stuff, so I'm going to be able to play that. But thanks for the $4.99, Nick. I can't wait to get to that. It looks fantastic. I mean, what can I say? But yeah, Death Stranding's crafting mechanics, it's not for me. I don't like crafting in any game outside of Minecraft, and it's just been a bunch of fun. And, a few people have asked me over the past week, should they get it? even though it does look a bit weird and you spend a lot of time walking, I'd say get it. It drops to 50% off I want to say every few weeks or so, ever since it came out on Xbox, and it's a weird game. Like, if you're familiar with Kojima's past work with Metal Gear Solid, and to some extent, Zone of the Enders, you are in for a weird story with excellent storytelling. The acting in this game is phenomenal. The visuals are phenomenal. Even if you have a Series S, you're playing at 60 frames per second, and it still looks phenomenal. Say what you will about Kojima's games, but they are really well optimized. In fact, probably one of the best optimized games I've played in a long time. And I only found out, like, kind of recently, it also has a port on iPhone and iPad. I think you need an M1 chip device, but it's super impressive what he's been able to do with that game on certain different devices. And I do think we will see, Death Stranding Director's Cut as a Switch 2 launch title. I mean, why not? It's probably going to be able to play the thing, but Death Stranding being good. Avowed. Let me talk about Avowed. So I kind of complain all the time on social media about open world RPGs and how we don't get region-based RPGs, or I want to call them hub world RPGs, that much. It just feels like it's always open world bloat, and the thing that's hooked me with Starfield is it's an amazing combat system in regions that don't even feel like that massive. It feels like there's always something to do. There's always a dungeon nearby, and you spend less time traveling and exploring and just finding cool things. Maybe you find a cool dungeon. Maybe you find an army behind, a waterfall. Or maybe, who knows, you find one of the most interesting side quests in the entire game by walking into a random cave in the first region of the game. If people don't know what I'm talking about, there's a quest called Dawn Treader. That is arguably one of the coolest side quests I've ever played. And it's a side quest most people will completely miss out on. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about an RPG. It's that you can have these things and have people experience the game in so many different ways, where my experience and your experience could be completely different. And I think that's a really cool thing with Avowed. And, I'll get back onto the combat. The combat's fun, right? If you can hook me with really cool combat in an RPG, you're going to get my attention for a long time in multiple playthroughs. Like, I can see this game as something I'm going to replay maybe every year or so. Maybe not on the style of Mass Effect, where I've maybe obsessively played it over 11 times. That's the first game alone. Avowed, I think I'm going to enjoy future playthroughs. And the cool thing about that is that they officially came out a few days ago with a brand new patch. And it gave me the number one most requested feature that I've wanted since the game came out. You can switch back and forth on the fly between first-person and third-person modes, which is really cool. But for me, I do not like a far-away camera in third-person mode. But in first-person, I want a 90-degree field of view. So every single time I've been playing it, I've had to literally pause the game every time I switch views and change the field of view slider. So my number one request was to have different field of view sliders for each view. And the latest patch has all that stuff. So, like, outside of the fixes for certain quests, certain bugs and whatnot, this feature, which kind of seems small to a lot of people, to me it's a game changer. Because I like going to explore in third person and combat in first person. The magic looks so good in the game. And yeah, what can I say? Excellent patch. It's made the game even better for me. So as an RPG fan, it's delivering on all fronts. And plus, the game's going to get a roadmap. So they came out alongside the update list, we'll call it, the patch sheet, and it just randomly said that, they have a plan for a roadmap. So it looks like a lot of people are going to get what they want. Maybe future expansions, maybe featuring different side characters, different companions, maybe a new game plus mode. Although some people think it's not going to happen because of the way the ending is. Although I'm not at the ending, so I can't say it. But I will say this. I love new game plus modes. I'm one of the nerds online that I replay games, so having the ability to go into a game from the start with maybe all of your experience points. I kind of dig that. I really like it when games allow that. And I think for Avowed, they're going to have to do some balancing stuff for how you activate some quests early on. But all in all, it looks like we're going to get some cool content for the game. And it's good to see the game succeed, you know? It's an RPG that launched in Game Pass. And, you know, some people have, like, really hated on the game. And I really don't understand. You know, you have the usual suspects online. But it's a fun RPG with excellent combat and an interesting world. And, you know, my only negative for the game is actually something that works in its favor for a lot of people, and that's the game lore dumps on you. You know, it's set in an existing universe with Pillars of Eternity. I haven't played Pillars of Eternity 1 and 2, although I should really get to them next. You know, if you've played those games, and then when you're having a conversation with a character in that world, they're going to be mentioning all these different things that happen in Pillars of Eternity 1 and 2. And if you've played those games, you're going to be like, wow, that's interesting. I know this person. I know about this vent. But for me, I'm like completely thrown in the deep end, so to speak. Thankfully, during conversations, you can actually look at the lore in-game, which I really like. I know some other games have done this too, but it's a cool feature. Nobody really loses out. You know, for people jumping in the show right now, again, Logan can't be here this week, but if he can make it, he can just jump in whenever he wants. Anyway, let's see. Oh, yeah, and I've been playing a game, and I couldn't get the footage for the podcast. I apologize. But I've been playing a game that launched in Game Pass last week, and it's called Mullet Mad Jack. Now, I talk about all the time how gaming needs more original new ideas. I talk about it all the time, and if it bothers people, I'm sorry, it might annoy you to some extent, but realistically, every game we get is kind of the same. It's some variation of something we've played before. Maybe that's what the developers just want to do. Maybe people ran out of ideas. However, this game, Mullet Mad Jack, it launched in Game Pass, and let me tell you, it's possibly one of the most refreshing takes on the boomer shooter that I've ever seen. You know, so for people that don't know, it's a boomer shooter. It's very much in the style of an old Doom game, but it's set in this retro futuristic world that's clearly inspired by late 80s sci-fi anime, such as in early 90s anime such as Akira and Ghost in the Shell. And for people that know me, I love Ghost in the Shell. I adore that game. Oh, that anime film, should I say. I adore that film. It's super good. And I love cyberpunk worlds in general. But this, outside of having this cool 80s and 90s, you know, retro aesthetic, it also has synthwave music. Now, a lot of people don't know what synthwave is because it's kind of a very niche genre of music. And it's kind of retro 80s inspired electronic music. And there's different subgenres of synthwave. There's jazz, there's rock, there's metal, there's rap, there's basically everything. But synthwave, it all sounds electronic, and this game has that in spades. It's amazing. So what's the game about, you might be wondering? Well, it's a first-person shooter where it's set in the future, and everyone basically has the attention span of a walnut. So kind of like real life. So basically, to get dopamine hits, you are basically a bounty hunter, and you have 15 seconds to live. And the only way to refill your dopamine and stay alive is by ending enemies' lives. And this is all on camera. It's all on, you know, social media in this world. It's a really cool take, and kind of like how the world may end up going at some point. You never know. But its take is basically the game ends if you don't get your dopamine rush. And, you know, this time changes depending on which difficulty you want. So if you want to play on super easy, it's basically the same game, but without the timer. I think easy mode is 20 seconds, normal is 15, and I believe hard mode is 5 to 10 seconds. But it's such a cool game. You know, each enemy takes basically 1 or 2 hits to, you know, end, and it's a fun game. It's a super fun game. Launched in Game Pass, And it's, again, one of the most unique takes on the boomer shooter I've seen in quite a while. I'm absolutely loving it. I think a lot of people will dig it. And if the timer puts you off, look, I'm not one of these people online where I'm going to harp on someone for playing on a different difficulty. Like, you do you. Gaming's all about enjoyment, so while I'm playing it on normal, maybe you don't want the timer, play it on easy, you'll have a laugh. And the art style alone is worth playing. And if people aren't familiar with synthwave, just load up the game and listen to the start screen music. That game has possibly one of the best start screens of all time. So if you like 80s stuff, if you like Akira, if you like Ghost in the Shell, synthwave, and Doom, it's probably going to be one of the best games of the year. In fact, I think this might actually be Game of the Year worthy when it comes to the indie scene, because it's such a good game. Such a good game. I think a lot of people will love it. And, outside of that, I'll go back to Death Stranding quickly because, again, it's a weird game, I'm on Chapter 7, that game, or Chapter 8, shall I say. That game is weirdly long. I've put around 35 hours into it, I believe, and it turns out I'm, just over halfway through. Great game, what can I say? Kojima's absolutely nuts. Anyway, that's what I've been playing. I have a bunch of stuff to talk about because, again, we have 50 topics. At least it feels that way. So, let's get the big one out of the way. Actually, let's get the only negative topic out of the way because it's kind of sad and it's kind of it's a bad thing for the industry. So, and bear in mind, everyone listening may not even you've never heard of this game, right? It's called Spectre Divided. Now, I never heard of this game until I was doing some research for an upcoming video, and this game, I'm not even kidding, up until about 2 days ago, was number 1 in top 3 games on Xbox. So, when I first saw this game, I never heard of it before. Bear in mind, on this channel, I cover games that are coming to Xbox every single month. Although I have missed the past 2 months just because I've been extremely sick. We're getting back to, the usual this week. Anyway, my point is that I cover games. I have a database of upcoming games coming to Xbox. And I've been doing this for about 2 years now, 2.5 years. And let me tell you, I've never once even heard of Spectre Divided. Never once. I've never had it included in a list because I've never heard of it. I never saw any Kickstarter for it, no trailers, no articles by big media outlets. Nobody was covering this game. And it turns out this game was super popular. It was number 1 on Xbox in the top 3 games. So it had more players on Xbox than Marvel Rivals, which when it launched in December, it was a success out of the gate. So, I heard about this game, and I was interested thinking, what the hell is it? Nobody's talking about it. And the developers basically put out the other day that they are shutting shop. The studio's been shut down, and as of this year, they are going to shut down the game. So basically, that's another studio shutting down. And allegedly, and I have to say this, they made $30+ million in the first year, and they still haven't to shut shop. The AAA gaming space is unsustainable. Now, maybe they've had some expenditures which we don't know about, but from what I can tell, they had some sort of esports event, and they paid for, how should I put it, influencer content, even though I've seen no one cover it. It's a hilariously mismanaged product and studio, and we're just seeing millions of dollars time and time again being put into these projects which won't make any money. And even though this was the number 1 game on Xbox free games, and I think it was on PlayStation as well, I'm not sure about PC, but they weren't making enough money via the Battle Pass and skins, even though it was the number 1 played game. So it just goes to show that, you can have these games come out of the gate, be super popular, but they can still not make money. But at the same time, maybe the studio was just mismanaged. I guess we'll never know. Maybe a developer will come out at some point, but yeah, another studio shutting shop, but it's for a game most people haven't heard of. I'll be interested, everyone listening. Up until this podcast, or the studio shutting down, have you even heard of Spectre Divided? Because, again, I cover games coming to the platform, never even heard of it at all. And it's a class-based, slower-paced, Valorant-style hero shooter. Again, it was on no one's radar, and it's kind of just going the way of the dodo. And that's sad. But anyway, we'll move on. We've got some good news to talk about. Split Fiction. Look, here's Light Studios. They are possibly one of the best developers in the industry at the minute. They know what they're doing. And when they set out to make co-op games, they actually do something different, right? They go out and make a game that's specifically for co-op. Not just a single-player game with a co-op tacked-on thing in the side. No, they make a game from the ground up for you and a friend to play, be it online or on the same couch. And, the way they do the friend pass is such a pro-consumer move that I really hope other developers do it because, on Xbox right now, it's the top paid game on the platform, and it's a co-op game. This type of game would be considered niche a couple of years ago, or even now. And it's hugely popular. They've sold over 2 million copies in the first 48 hours, and it looks like the studio, they're going to continue to have amazing success going forward. And everyone that talks about this game is extremely positive, right? Infinite Umber was talking about how it's Game of the Year level material, and I can't wait to play it. I should be playing it this weekend, I think. But man, to have a Game of the Year contender this early on in the year, and it's a co-op game, they have to be one of the best studios in the business, and they are able to put out these high quality games every 3 years, and they are almost going to be Game of the Year contenders. It's incredible, really. Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons. If that game doesn't tug at the heartstrings, then nothing will. Nothing. A Way Out, as a Prison Break fan, that game absolutely delivered. Absolutely delivers. And if people haven't played that, I highly recommend it. Those games are also on Game Pass. And, It Takes Two is such a fun adventure with tons of different gameplay mechanics. And if you like platformers, that one is just different. I think a lot of people will love that. But yeah, here's Light Studios, man. They're going to go down as one of the best studios. Protect them at all costs. Let them make some good stuff. And, look, as someone that doesn't play a lot of co-op games, their games are basically the only co-op games I play. So, they're clearly making a good product. Anyway, I just love seeing success like that. You know what? Let's talk about this quickly because it's actually a big topic today, and that's Assassin's Creed Shadows. Now, this game, shocker, has had controversy, and I'm doing air quotes, for the past year and a half. Constant controversy. And, from the onset, a lot of people have been wanting Assassin's Creed to go to Japan since the beginning. Ever since 2007, when that first game came out, all I've seen online, wouldn't Japan be a cool setting? My number one setting for Assassin's Creed was actually, I wanted a Viking setting, and I got that, but I've talked about Assassin's Creed Valhalla in the past. We'll leave that for another day. But Shadows is reviewing extremely well. Last time I checked, I think it's an 83 on Metacritic. And, Metacritic to me doesn't really matter, I think Assassin's Creed Mirage has absolutely amazing gameplay mechanics. I'm talking about the throwing knife. Best thing ever. But that game, it's a fun game, but it has a short story, very short story. And if anything, it's the shortest Assassin's Creed game, even though it has the best gameplay mechanics. So for me, Metacritic isn't really anything, but considering how Valhalla was received, I think a lot of eyes on this game. Valhalla came out when we were all stuck in the house. We were basically in our third lockdown in the UK, so we had these shiny brand new consoles out with the Xbox Series XS and PlayStation 5, and we wanted games to play. That was a big game to have, a really big game to have on your console in 2020. So that's all everyone played. Everyone bought it. I think it's actually the best-selling Assassin's Creed game of all time, even though I think it's actually one of the worst when it comes to its story. But That they needed a big bounce back, and we'll obviously talk about Assassin's Creed and Ubisoft later. But like the reviews are coming out really well. A lot of people are saying it's not perfect, but then again, I could mention something wrong with every Assassin's Creed game, some of which are my favorite games of all time. But like Shadows looks fantastic, and as someone that's purposefully kept away from content outside of the trailers, let me tell you, the stuff I've seen today, I am I'm extremely excited to play this. Like Assassin's Creed, it's in the title. It's got gore. You know what you're going to do in the game. However, the clip I saw today was the samurai character Yosuke in combat with another samurai, and literally cut off this person's arms and head. We've never had anything like that in Assassin's Creed before, so it's a bit different. But man, the beautiful world in this game is unlike anything else, and I think this might be the push Assassin's Creed has needed. When Assassin's Creed first came out in 2007, its crowd tech was mind blowing to the point where like that was a game you showed off your 360 or PS3 on. And like we'd never seen anything like that before. Not really. Big, beautiful open world. Although the first game doesn't actually have anything to do. You're just wandering around, and the only way you can assassinate targets in that game is if you're standing directly next to them. That was the only way you could do it. And Assassin's Creed 2, even though it was in the same generation, felt like a generational bump. The different ways you could assassinate targets, the interactive world, the side quests, the mini games, everything about Assassin's Creed 2 going into Brotherhood, it felt like it may as well have been a new generation. But then we didn't really have that next push, that next jump, until Assassin's Creed Unity. But the problem with that is, as you know, it was slightly buggy. It was buggy. It had a lot of broken gameplay elements. Although it had the best parkour to date, it had the best visuals to date, and even by today's standards, Assassin's Creed Unity could still go toe-to-toe with most next-gen games. I apologize if people heard that. Massive, loud motorcycle just went past my house. Anyway, I think a lot of people have been waiting for that next-gen push, because this is a next-gen only Assassin's Creed game. You can tell with the environment. It's beautiful. It has dynamic seasons, something of which we've never seen in Assassin's Creed before. And I think a lot of people have been wanting for that, that next push. And also you have interactive buildings and environmental elements. So yes, you can cut bamboo in half. You can cut long grass. But you can cut like branches off trees during combat. You can throw people through walls. And it's got some level of destructibility to it, which we haven't had in an Assassin's Creed game before. Yes, there's been the odd game where you can like jump through like some windows, but there's been nothing like this at all. And like, look, if you're new to the channel or new following me, you don't know this, but I talk about Mass Effect on an almost daily basis, to the point where people think I'm actually obsessed with that trilogy. They'd be right, but I am obsessed with those games. But Assassin's Creed is one of my favorite franchises. I just don't talk about it all the time, and I've been wanting just something new for Assassin's Creed for years. Like, I loved Mirage. I could talk about Mirage all day, but its story was extremely disappointing and very short. Gameplay, beautiful. Beautiful gameplay. But with Shadows, it looks like it's the next jump for Assassin's Creed, something the franchise has needed. And, I do think it's a shame that a lot of people online just want to argue about this game constantly. They're not talking about the question. They're not talking about the combat. They're not talking about this is clearly the goriest Assassin's Creed game of all time by a large margin. Very large margin. But the game looks fantastic, and I'm happy to see. And, if you pre-ordered this game, you actually get the first expansion for free. So previous Assassin's Creed games, they do the Season Pass, where you either get the Gold Edition or just buy the Season Pass later on, and then you have access to 2 pieces of DLC, which go by expansions, within a year of release. That's how they've been doing it for close to a decade now. But with this game, with the delays and stuff, they've said, like, hey, if you pre-order this game, you get the first expansion for free. And considering what Ubisoft's going through at the minute, that is an extremely poor consumer move. So, all in all, it looks like Ubisoft have made a really good game with some poor consumer moves attached. And look, I will always be that person that says, look, you shouldn't pre-order games. Not really. Unless you buy a physical edition of a game, maybe it's a collector's edition, maybe you're worried about games running out, which doesn't happen much these days. Digital copies of games, they aren't going to run out of them, right? You can buy a game day one without pre-ordering it. However, to get an expansion for free, I'd lean towards getting it. So if you have the inkling to get this game, pre-order it, because you'll get a free expansion. So if it turns out you like the game, you're going to get an extra, 15 to 30 hours for free in the future. Nothing wrong with that, is there? And, as an Assassin's Creed game, I've been wanting the stealth mechanics to evolve for, I want to say, since Unity came out, Because bear in mind, we never used to be able to crouch in Assassin's Creed games, and then we were able to with Unity and stuff. But like with this game, I've wanted stealth to evolve a bit, and you can hang on to ceilings and wait for enemies to go past. You can throw up a rope or whatever it's called if you're playing as Naoe, the ninja character, the shinobi, and climb up walls that way. You're a very acrobatic person, and like as someone that wants more stealth elements, her character looks phenomenal in action. Super fast combat, using a bunch of different like super fast weapons and stuff. It looks great. What can I say? I think a lot of people are going to really enjoy this game. You're obviously going to have the usual suspects online, which they feel, I'm not going to mention names, but they feel the need to attack every game possible, even if like it's critically reviewed well and beloved. People are just going to go after this game. I've noticed over the past few years now, I'm sure a lot of people listening have noticed this, that, no matter the game, there's this wave of hate that kind of just latches itself onto every major AAA release now, because a game either comes out and it's super successful, best-selling game of all time, massive wave of hype and marketing material, or it fails. We see this time and time again now, and I think there's this subset of people online that they want this game to fail. They want Ubisoft to go under. Let me tell you, and we'll be talking about Ubisoft later on when it comes to Microsoft, like, Ubisoft are one of my favourite publishers. Or at least they used to be. They used to come out with so many different interesting games, right? In the span of 2012 to 2013, they came out with Assassin's Creed 4, Assassin's Creed 3, Splinter Cell Blacklist, which is the best Splinter Cell game when it comes to gameplay. They came out with Far Cry 3. They came out with a third-person shooter Ghost Recon game. They had Rayman Origins, Rayman Legends. Like, they had so many interesting games in different genres that played completely differently, to the point where, like, if you had like a very particular game taste, they may have made something that you wanted. Hell, they came out, and Obsidian made this. They came out with the South Park RPG, South Park: The Stick of Truth. Like, who would have thought that would have worked in that type of game? And it, like, if people haven't played The Stick of Truth, play it. I think it's also on Game Pass. Like, it's a super fun game. If you play it in Europe, there's certain things you don't see in the game. But the game's good. But Ubisoft, they used to make all sorts of content, all sorts of content. Like, and I will praise them for that. But I think, Ubisoft, they need this win. Assassin's Creed tends to be one of those games that it can sell so well, it can basically carry the entire company. So I hope they see huge success with this, because, look, again, talk about the Xbox thing in a bit. Ubisoft severely needs a win. They came out with Avatar: Frontiers of Pandora. And, clearly there's gameplay on screen right now. I love Avatar: Frontiers of Pandora, but they didn't even market the game. In the UK, no marketing at all. Star Wars Outlaws, I honestly don't get the hate rage towards that game, because I played it. I am roughly 3/4 through the game, and let me tell you, I think it's a fun game. Simplistic, cool space combat. I like the world. Even though, look, it's not perfect. I think the third-person shooting mechanics are slightly stiff, but it's still a fun game, which I would actually recommend to people, especially if you're looking for a new sci-fi shooter with a story and stuff. But like Ubisoft, they need the win. They need a big seller, and hopefully this is that. Hopefully they stick around for a long time. And as an Assassin's Creed fan, it looks like this is going in the right direction. Now, when it comes to Shadows, apparently, it's the final RPG Assassin's Creed game. So, who knows what's going to happen next? Allegedly, we're getting Assassin's Creed 4 Remake later this year. And if people have never played Assassin's Creed 4, let me tell you, you are in for a treat. That game is so much fun, and arguably, I'll put it out there, I think it's the best pirate game ever made. Like, I enjoyed Sea of Thieves, but Assassin's Creed 4, there's something special about that game. It's fun from start to finish. I mean, some people say it's not even an Assassin's Creed game, it's just a good pirate game. Whichever side of the fence you lean on, everyone agrees it's a super fun game with an interesting story, interesting characters, and I think a lot of people are going to love it. But yeah, Assassin's Creed going forward, who knows what's going to happen. I just think, they need the win. They need the win. Anyway, we'll move on. You know what? So more owned games are coming to the cloud. I think they announced that 1,000 owned games are going to be available to play on XCloud. XCloud's in a weird place at the minute because, streaming varies on where you live. Popularity of streaming varies on where you live. And honestly, I think that, being able to stream your owned games, it's very important. It's nice of them to let you play Game Pass games on the go, but if I can play Elden Ring on my phone, I'll try it out. The latency's getting better, the visuals getting better, and every time I've played Forza or Fortnite on my mobile, let me tell you, the connection stays solid enough that the frame rate doesn't drop, the resolution does, which is the better way of doing it. But like, if they could just add more games, I can't wait. And yeah, obviously, I'm going to try Mass Effect on my iPhone at some point, because why not? Let's see if that's actually a good experience that people would enjoy. And it's Mass Effect, so people are obviously going to like it. But yeah, more owned games coming to the cloud. In fact, Assassin's Creed Shadows is going to be available on cloud as well if you own the game, which is really cool. And I've noticed a lot of big publishers being more cloud-centric with their newer releases. So Square Enix, shockingly, they are completely up for allowing their games to be played in the cloud. So they are actually one of the biggest supporters of xCloud with owned games, which I'm actually shocked by. But hey, if you can play your games on the go or wherever you want to go, especially when we have more devices coming out, that's just a cool thing. Now, let's see what we've got. Okay, yeah. Nightdive Studios is coming out with yet another game. They have to be one of the best studios in the industry when it comes to remasters, because it feels like every other month they are coming out with a brand new remaster. They came out with The Thing remastered in December. They came out with System Shock Remake, I think it was March last year. And it turns out they're coming out with System Shock 2 25th Anniversary Edition. And that's coming out in the next few months. We're going to be seeing some gameplay in action at the Future Game Show on March 20th. There's going to be a bunch of cool new games there. If you've been keeping up with things like Expedition 33 and stuff like that, that's going to be something to watch. But yeah, Nightdive Studios. By the way, the studios actually said this before. If you want a particular game remastered, maybe you want a collection or something, literally just reply to them on Twitter. They ask every so often. Yeah, I always talk about the Chronicles of Riddick games. Excuse me as I have a drink of my tea. I always talk about the Chronicles of Riddick games because, as a Riddick fan, I never got to play the games back in the day. But I bought them on 360 before the store shut down. And, Nightdive Studios, they would be perfect for those games. Because if you've played any of their remasters, they stay true to the original. They update the controls, which is the big one. and they give the game all this love that these games need. Like The Thing remastered, and the upcoming System Shock game. You've got 4K 120 FPS mods, you've got 60 FPS, you've got HDR, you've got high resolution textures, all the bells and whistles, quality of life improvements with new save features. So and I will port beg them for years to come about this. And everyone listening, please do this. Just reply to Nightdive Studios tweets and ask for the Chronicles of Riddick games. Imagine being able to fire up your Xbox Series XS, your PC, your Switch 2 or your PlayStation and play these Riddick games. So I'm not one to tell people to port beg a studio, but I'm effectively asking people to port beg a studio because I want these games. They also coming out with a 2-Rock game this year, I think. I don't know how they can actually remaster so many games at the same time. It feels like they have maybe 3 or 4 releases a year. And if I remember correctly, last year they also remastered Star Wars Dark Forces. And that is possibly one of the best remasters I've ever seen. To the point where, that was a boomer shooter, a Doom style game. And instead of having, 2D pixel sprites, the game features fully rendered 3D models. So, in essence, the game is essentially a remake because they remade every asset from scratch. So, that's a great example of that studio. I mean, if you want a good remaster or even a remake to that extent, they are the studio to keep your eyes on. But yeah, so if people want the Chronicles of Riddick games, please message them on my behalf. Anyway, we'll move on. Towerborne finally got its release. Towerborne was first announced on the Xbox Showcase, I want to say in 2021. That game has been announced for a hot minute, and we've had, PC alphas, we've had technical tests. I think there was also an open beta 6 months ago, and we've been wondering, when is this game coming? You can play it in single player or co-op or whatever. Well, it's actually coming out next month. So Towerborne is finally coming out on Xbox Series XS and PC April 29th. It will also be launching day one on Xbox Game Pass Ultimate, all that cool stuff. But yeah, it's finally coming. I've avoided every single tech test and beta, so I haven't played it yet. But it kind of if you liked that game Castle Crashers back in the day, you probably want to check this out. It looks super cool. You know what? We're about 46 minutes into the show, 42 minutes. If you're enjoying it, please hit like, share, and subscribe. I really hate doing these ads, but YouTube is an amazing website, and sometimes the link doesn't go out to everyone or let people know that the video is live. Anyway, we'll move on. So yeah, that's Towerborne. Oh, the Silent Hill F. So Silent Hill F was kind of loosely announced about a year ago, and let me tell you, a lot of people were really excited to have a brand new Silent Hill game, but we had next to no information on it whatsoever. So there was a Silent Hill event a few days ago, and it officially got announced for Xbox. Now, a lot of people still don't know what Silent Hill F is. Some people have asked me if it's a remake or something, or remastered. It's no, this is a brand new, big Silent Hill game, where you are going to be playing as a kind of a schoolgirl in Japan, and it's actually set in a real town that's in real life, and it's gory, it's gritty. I can't read the disclaimer on my channel, but read the disclaimer and what's going to be in that game. A lot of games will say in the disclaimer, hey, this game has violence, it has blood, it has mild mentioning of alcohol, that type of thing. We've had this for years. Read the description of of Silent Hill F. This game's going to be controversial at launch. I don't know if this game's going to get certain releases. So, Australia is pretty bad when it comes to censorship in video games, to the point where some games don't get released. Some games don't get released in Germany. So I don't know what's necessarily going to happen there with this game. But yeah, this is going to be one of the most adult-centric games we've probably seen in a long time. I know the way the the rating system works in the US is completely different. So it's probably going to have a full adult rating in the US. In the UK, it'll be rated 18. But yeah, so if you want a very gory, adult-centric game, this is going to be a game to keep your eye on. So yeah, anyway, it's set in I think it's set the 1970s, and it's set in Japan, set in a real town. The interesting part is it's not going to feature any ranged weapons at all, which I was actually surprised by. So the game will feature knives, axes, and pickaxes and that type of thing. So basically melee weapons. Honestly, I'm actually okay with that. You know, as long as it plays well. For people that have been following me for a while, I'll mention it. I'll get it out the way. I'm a scaredy cat, right? Horror games scare the living hell out of me. I think the liquor in Resident Evil 2 kind of scarred me for life. It is what it is, but I still like playing the occasional horror game. But yeah, Silent Hill F, it looks phenomenal. The weird thing about it, it has no release date whatsoever. So it has no release window. They just say wishlist now. So you could say the game's coming soon. However, I know how studios work. This game could be years out still. 1 year out, 2 year out. I mean, I've seen games on Xbox Live and Steam that have been wishlisted for years before launch. But hey, it's good news. We finally have a Silent Hill game coming to Xbox. There has been some theories that the remake of 2 will come to Xbox this October. I'll cover that whenever that gets mentioned. But hey, the Silent Hill game, it looks fantastic. Again, I don't know if this game's going to be available in most countries. Like, read the disclaimer. You know, I've been playing video games my whole life, ever since I was like 2, basically. And you know, with the release of Manhunt, back on the was it PlayStation 2 Manhunt? Yeah. Like ever since that game came out, like I've seen certain games get, you know, there's been some sort of censorship or people wanting censorship. And, you know, some games banned altogether. Scenes in games banned. Well, with Manhunt, you know, I believe they had to take that game off the shelf at some point. It may have been put on after a certain amount of time, but, you know, South Park The Stick of Truth, which I was mentioning before, that has heavy censorship in the UK. Although you can hear what's going on in those games. So in South Park The Stick of Truth, when you're abducted into the alien spaceship and something happens to Stan's dad, I think it's Stan's dad it happens to. You can hear it. You can hear it. You can guess what's going on. You can hear it, but you can't see it. Like, who knows what's going to happen with this? You know, I don't think they're going to do that kind of disclaimer for, you know, Silent Hill F. But who knows what's going to happen? I think people are going to be very shocked when that game comes out because, again, I don't know how they're going to be able to get away with half of the stuff that's said in that disclaimer. You know, it's not often you see games that's going to be controversial for its gore and adult-centric take on things. As you can tell, I'm trying to dance around saying certain words. But yeah, Silent Hill F, it's coming. We don't know when, and it's available for wishlisting now. Let's see what else we've got. Okay, so more Blizzard games are coming to Xbox Game Pass in the collection. It's a bunch of retro Blizzard games, which is really cool. People are wanting more Blizzard games. You know, I was talking to Logan about this last week, and as you know, a lot of people, including myself, like we've been waiting for Blizzard games to come to Xbox Game Pass, Activision games to Xbox Game Pass. So, like, when the ABK thing was all announced, like, there was a lot of people talking about, oh, Call of Duty and Game Pass Day 1. Like, Call of Duty was the last thing on my mind, you know, even though it's the biggest game on the planet, essentially, every year. But, like, in the back of my mind, I want these licensed games. Like, we can remove, you know, Guitar Hero out the way. I'm saying to some extent. But, like, licensed games such as Deadpool Definitive Edition, you know, X-Men Wolverine Origins, you know, to some extent. There's a bunch of Spider-Man games. I see, I see Gaz in chat. PlayStation better. Someone has to say it every time, so why not you? You know, it's like we need some normality here. But yeah, uh, you know, a lot of people have been wanting these games to come to Game Pass. You know, I will talk about it all the time. The Transformers games. You know, when Xbox first purchased Activision, Blizzard, King, and it all went through, at like 2 in the morning in the UK, Call of Duty wasn't trending. It was Transformers Cybertron. That's how many nerds were just waiting, like myself, were waiting for these games to show up, right? You know, not some Call of Duty game from last year, not some Diablo game from 2 years ago. We want some old-ass Transformer games. You know, these games have been like highly regarded for years. Third person, over the shoulder, Gears style Transformers games. And they're sitting there on a hard drive somewhere. To the point where Hasbro have actively said multiple times that they want these games to be in Game Pass. And it just hasn't happened yet. And, you know, yes, we are getting one game now and then from Microsoft in Game Pass. But I think, you know, a lot of people are getting tired of waiting. You know, patience is a virtue and all that stuff. But, like, look, I have these Transformers games sitting right next to me. Right? And they're in their plastic. I'd prefer to not open them. I think a lot of people would just like to be able to play them on the console, even if they aren't Game Pass straight away. I think it's important to get these games backwards compatible. You know, yes, they ended the backwards compatibility program. I don't care. There's so many games that they have that they can make backwards compatible. Games that can still be listed on the store. I use Singularity as an example, right? That has no license issues. Activision and Microsoft 100% own that game now. So why can't that game be made backwards compatible? Why can't things like the Wolfenstein game from 2009 be backwards compatible? You know, that was a game made by Bethesda and published by Activision, if I remember correctly. There's a few games that are like that. I think Microsoft needs to revisit the backwards compatible program. Right? It's one of their strongest suits. They have so many games that should be backwards compatible that aren't. And look, there's games that are still up for sale on GOG, on Steam, that they could easily make backwards compatible. And I'm saying easily because, look, I don't know how they do the coding behind the scenes to get backwards compatibility to work, but surely some of these games could be made backwards compatible. And like, they have super talented engineers that can do this stuff. That's why you can play things like Mirror's Edge at 4K 60. That's why you can play things like Titanfall 2 at 120 frames per second, because their BC team are bloody wizards, right? So, like, what I'm saying is, get the team back on these games. You know, there's an EA game from like the early 2010s, which I think a lot of people would love to be backwards compatible, and that's the Saboteur. That's a World War II game, an open world game set in Paris, and it's one of the most unique, really cool open world games I've ever played. And most people will never get to experience it because, one, it's not available on console, and two, it's a game that EA will never consider remastering. Ever. But it's still available to buy on Steam and GOG, I believe. But yeah, not on console. It screams easy money. And these backwards compatible games, they make money, you know? Even today, I went on the store on Xbox Live. Do you know what's in the top 10? Skate 3. Skate 3 is always in the top 10. Always. And that's because, one, it's a really cool skateboarding game with interesting mechanics. But, like, people want that nostalgia. They love that nostalgia. And they are willing to pay for it. And plus, if you have a lot of physical games like me, going back to 360 and the original Xbox, there's a lot of games I will buy digitally, even though I own them on disc, right? So, I think if people show that they want these games to be backwards compatible or want these games to be put into Game Pass, like, something's got to give at some point, because we have never been told at any point in the past year and a half that these games will never come. And, you know, Microsoft, sometimes they are actually, you know, fairly quick to the point when they say, hey, this isn't happening. You know, Like, say what you will about their multi-platform stuff, but Microsoft tends to get things out of the way if they can, and they have never said no to the backwards compatibility games returning or games going to Game Pass. We get one Activision Blizzard game in Game Pass a month now. It looks like we're going to get the original Modern Warfare 3 at some point because it had its listing. So there's something happening behind the scenes. We just don't really know what's going on. And it's a shame because Activision's back catalogue, like, screw all the new games coming out, their back catalogue is absolutely nuts. It's absolutely nuts. They have several amazing Spider-Man games. They have they have a bunch of superhero games, although that's a topic for another day. They have... Look, I'll talk about the Cybertron games. Arguably, their most wanted games that aren't superhero titles. So, yeah, if people just show that they want these games online, I'm sure things will happen. It's just something's got to give at some point because, look, I've got plenty of games to play. Everyone has plenty of games to play. But we just want an official yes or no at some point. Will it happen eventually? Yes or no? That's all we want. You know what? We'll talk about the Xbox handheld quickly because it's a bit of a weird topic, this one. So, the Xbox handheld, and we talked about this last week, where the next-gen Xbox is apparently coming in 2027. And for the longest time, we've been talking about how Xbox launching their console in 2026 is actually a very smart move when it comes to getting it out first. However, everyone's stance is really different online. A lot of people really don't like the idea of getting a new console in 2026 because this generation's been kind of slow. So whereas it's been Microsoft's strongest generation yet when it comes to first-party content, let's be honest, like, this whole generation from every company, it's been slow. The first year of the consoles, we were all stuck in the house. We were all playing Assassin's Creed Valhalla in the house. And every game was getting delayed. And I think having an extra year under the generation this time, I think, you know what? Let people enjoy the hardware they have. Let the developers squeeze as much as they can out of these pieces of hardware we have. So, like, I get it. That's fair enough. And they may still even be a year ahead of the competition when it comes to their release of the console. But I'll get into the handheld. So, apparently, next generation Xbox is going to be launching their main console and the handheld. But they're also going to be launching OEM devices made by different companies this year. And these will be PC-centric handhelds. Now, the reaction online was stark, to say the least. People were losing the marbles, saying it's the end of Xbox because these are PC handhelds. And for people that didn't really get my take last week, I'll mention it quickly now. So the handheld this year is meant to be a PC-centric handheld device where you can play your streamed games, through the cloud, but you can also play PC games. Now, the reason why I don't think it's the end of the world and all that stuff is because, they still have their console handheld coming in the future. But if you think about it, all of Xbox's games are PC games anyway. So you have clouds that work with, Play Anywhere. So if you play a lot of Xbox games, first-party games, and some third-party games, like your saves are still going to work. Your purchases are still going to work because they are Xbox games. So I think on that front, it's fine. But also, I think this is for Microsoft to get their name out there and be recognized as not just a console, but as a PC device as well. Because, look, in the UK, all of the Game Pass advertising on YouTube, it's for PC Game Pass. Every single time, without fail. So, my thought is they want to have Xbox, because, like, Xbox is the gaming division at Microsoft, right? Everything is Xbox. Your phone is an Xbox. We've seen that ad. This is an Xbox, and it shows you a block of cheese, and that's an Xbox. But I think they want PCs to be recognized as an Xbox device, and they want the public to recognize that, like, big time. So they're going to have these OEM devices, maybe made by LG or Samsung or whoever makes these PC handhelds, to just slap an Xbox logo on, let you sign into your Xbox account, and just play some games. And that might work out for them. This year, in like the past few years, or past 4 or 5 years, like the PC handheld market has taken off, right? The Steam Deck came out, it blew everyone's like imagination and how it would sell and popularity. Like, people love the Steam Deck. Then you have the ROG Ally, which I think the ROG Ally looks like the coolest handheld PC console thing, but like they clearly want to have their foot in the market, because look, Steam OS, that's going to be available on third-party devices. So Microsoft, they do not want a PS2 style situation where, hey, it's 2000, you have PlayStation coming out with a DVD player in their console that can play DVDs, CDs. It's going to be the centerpiece of the living room. They don't want that to happen in 2025 and 2026 when it comes to PC handhelds or PCs in general, because look, Xbox makes more money than Windows. Windows is becoming a less and less, I don't want to say a less relevant piece of software, but if you only play video games on your PC, why would you need Windows? Now, if they can get their name out there and say, hey, look, Xbox is also a PC, that's going to incentivize some people at least to, maybe buy their device. That's the way I see it anyway. But I think it's just Microsoft wanting to cover their PC user base, get them, used to being an Xbox product, and then concentrate on the next generation Xbox, which they're already talking about, Phil Spencer, at every opportunity, I think he talks about a portable or handheld Xbox in every other sentence. So there's something happening over there when it comes to the handheld stuff, but we really just don't know until it happens. And, when it comes to the whole OEM device thing, I don't really think it's that bad of a thing for Microsoft to have, PC handhelds made by other manufacturers. We have another super chat by Nick Wendland for the $4.99. Thank you very much. He says none of those handhelds are as popular as the Switch. I mean, that's true. The thing about PC handhelds and the Switch is it's a portable Nintendo device that can play Pokemon. Pokemon is like, people might like meme on like the newer Pokemon games, but the Pokemon games are some of the biggest games in the world. The franchise has made like billions of dollars. Merchandise alone, it's one of the biggest franchises on the planet. In fact, I think when it comes to money made just off merchandise alone, excuse me, it might actually be the most valuable franchise on the planet. But like, the PC handhelds would never sell as much as a Switch, ever. I mean, who is a PC handheld really for? And the way I see it is that a PC handheld is basically a better option for a PC gamer to get as a portable device as opposed to a gaming laptop. Gaming laptops are absurdly priced. You're talking thousands of pounds for a device that you're going to play games on. It's going to overheat. Like, gaming laptops, they're huge and they cost a lot. However, a Steam Deck is way more affordable, smaller, and honestly, I think it's just easier for gamers to get into. And I don't think a device has to sell, Switch numbers to be popular. The Steam Deck, like, Valve are very happy with where that's going. ROG Ally, that's selling really well. I think comparing everything to the Switch 2, it's not fair. It's like comparing The Hobbit to Lord of the Rings. The Hobbit's a great trilogy, but it's not Lord of the Rings, and it doesn't have to be, and it never will be. But I think, like, what's the Switch at? I think it's like 150 million. It's some absurd number. Like, the Steam Deck has no chance of doing that ever, and it doesn't have to. But I think it's weird, because if you go back 6 years ago, and if you ask me who's coming out with a handheld or who's doing handhelds, if someone told me anyone other than Nintendo was doing a handheld in general, I would laugh. Like, no one thought a handheld would do well if it wasn't made by Nintendo. And look what's happening. People like Steam Decks. I think there's a LG device that almost looks like a Switch. I can't remember its name. Has like a touchpad on one of the controllers. But like people like these PC handhelds. You know, we're going to see another generation of the Steam Deck at some point, and I think they're going to give it a couple of years because they don't really need to do one just yet. People seem fairly, happy with the power of what the Steam Deck can do, and if you can get a game that works on a Steam Deck, it's pretty much going to work on your ROG Ally and stuff. But yeah, the way I see it, it's Microsoft trying to get their brand associated more with PC gaming because, like, look, you're not going to buy a huge desktop with an Xbox branded logo on it. I can't see that happening. But you could probably buy a Lenovo Xbox handheld that will also play your own games and Game Pass games. And look, there's going to be a lot of people that maybe they only play games in Game Pass. Maybe they are part of the generation where they only play Fortnite. If people only play Fortnite, I'll never understand. But you catch my drift. That's all I'll say. And plus, I'm actually interested to see what a first-party Xbox handheld will look like. Yes, that's going to be 2 years away at that point, but I really want to see what a portable Xbox would look like. Like, will you be able to dock it to a television and play games that way? Hopefully, And plus, like, I have a built-in library on Xbox of, I think it's like 700 games at this point. But like, I would love to be able to maybe buy something like that and play it on the go, and then attach it to a TV. I think it would be cool. But yeah, that's the Xbox handheld. I think we'll find out. We're obviously going to find out more this summer. But yeah, Microsoft, they obviously have something cooking. It's just going to take some time to show. Anyway, we'll move on. You know what? We still have a bunch of different topics to go over. Okay, let's talk about Xbox buying Ubisoft IP. Now this topic kind of came out of nowhere because Ubisoft, they're going through their issues at the minute, and like for the past several years, let's just say 2 years, people have been going on like, will Microsoft buy any more publishers? Should they buy any more publishers? And like I've even said for the longest time, I don't think Microsoft should buy any more publishers. I think the age of anyone buying publishers should just be done. It's all done and dusted. And plus, it's very tiring to talk about. Let me tell you, them buying IP is a completely different kettle of fish, shall I say. I can't speak today. And plus, it's just me talking. So, Ubisoft, they are having major struggles. They pretty much banking on Assassin's Creed to do gangbusters. They need this game to sell probably upwards of 10 to 15 million copies. But like having an entire company basically rely on one game, like I think the only company that can get away with that, and that is EA with FIFA, or what did they call it now? EA Sports FC 25. Horrible name, by the way. Look, I think that Ubisoft, like, they have some of the most amazing IP. I talk about Splinter Cell all the time. Like, the thumbnail to this video features Sam Fisher. Like, I am fed up of waiting for a new Splinter Cell game. I'm fed up of not getting any updates on the remake. I'm just fed up of that franchise going to waste. They have a lot of franchises going to waste. Ghost Recon is a franchise that I don't even think they're touching at the minute. You have Watch Dogs. It's a franchise they literally gave up on because they didn't know what to do with it. You have The Division, which they've had like 2 or 3 different Division games cancelled in the past 3 years. The Division 3 looks like it may not be happening anytime soon. Division fans are waiting for new stuff to come out, and it looks like it's not happening. And like, look, their 2 main valuable properties is Assassin's Creed and Rainbow Six Siege. Rainbow Six Siege is the one of the longest running games this past generation, where like it's getting a complete graphical overhaul and new content, and new destructibility and all that stuff. Like, that's a game that's basically going to live on for years to come. And Assassin's Creed prints money, so like, to me, when I was posting about this the other day, I think realistically, like, those two games I just mentioned, or franchises, Assassin's Creed and Rainbow Six, I do not think those will be sold off at all. You know, even though they could probably get multiples of billions of dollars for Assassin's Creed alone, I can't see it happening. You know, Ubisoft, they should pretty much concentrate on selling IP that they don't touch anymore. You know, Rayman. Rayman is a franchise that it's been dormant since Rayman Legends. We've had Rayman skins in mobile games, and that's it. There was an Easter egg to one of the Rayman games in, I think, Far Cry 5, and that's it. People are starving for Rayman content, and it just doesn't exist. People are wanting Splinter Cell to exist, and nothing's happening with it. Allegedly, we are getting a remaster of Splinter Cell Blacklist this year, but like the remake is still multiple years away, apparently. So like, I don't know what the hell to think at this point. You know, like everyone listening right now, there's probably an Assassin's Creed game at some point, or should I say a Ubisoft franchise at some point that you really loved, and the franchise isn't what it used to be, right? I love Ghost Recon Wildlands. Breakpoint came out. Not only did it failed to meet expectations to everyone, it was missing simple gameplay features that Wildlands had. It took them maybe a year to fully fix the game and get out simple features. They put in NFTs in that game, and they said to people that, hey, you're going to be able to transfer your items, such as like clothing and stuff, these NFTs you buy, to other Ubisoft games. And what did they do within like a month? They cancelled the whole project altogether. And they haven't even mentioned it since. You know, they apparently have another NFT game in the works. Like, everything Ubisoft is doing outside of making the occasional really good game, it's a massive failure. You know, they've had a Division movie in the works for Netflix for like 7 or 8 years. Might actually be 9 years now. No word in sight with what's happening with that movie. But Ubisoft, like, they mismanaging their own IP. You know, so that's Wildlands out the way. That's Ghost Recon out the way. And like, look at Assassin's Creed. They have like 8 Assassin's Creed games in development at the minute. 2 of which is meant to be their next major ones, which is Assassin's Creed Hex. Apparently, they don't have a creative direction for that game, and they are maybe banking on Assassin's Creed 2 and Brotherhood remakes. Now, don't get me wrong. Assassin's Creed 2 and Brotherhood are some of my favorite games of all time, but let's be honest. Did they really need to be remade? Maybe I like playing old games. Maybe I'm okay with those games because they, I have this nostalgia for them. But if those games in particular, I don't think need to be remade. And I think people are getting to the point now where we just want new games. But, when it comes to Ubisoft, they just messing up all the time. So I do think them selling off IP would actually work. But, people replied to me, and they had valid points. They said, well, who's going to make these games? Are they just going to be dormant IP? Because Xbox has a bunch of dormant IP. PlayStation has a bunch of dormant IP. Like, they would essentially have to buy developers as well. They would have to purchase different teams because, if I remember correctly, Ubisoft has over 20,000 developers, which is basically a small country at this point. So, like, you've got to wonder, like, what's happening. Like, will they just sell the IP? Will they sell studios? Because they have the studios to sell. They have studios that they've formed that have basically been, put on side projects for Ubisoft. They have developers making games that have no end in sight, such as Beyond Good and Evil 2, which is apparently still in development. They used to be one of my favorite publishers, and right now, I don't know what's happening with them. We can't trust some of the things they say because, look, I hope Assassin's Creed does well. But no matter what happens, they're going to glaze the living hell out of its sales, even if it does badly. They are apparently in denial about selling IP off to EA and Microsoft. Like, some shareholders weren't happy with not knowing. Like, they are very a disconjointed organization. And that's not a good sign. I think, if you fast forward maybe 1 or 2 years, like Ubisoft might not be here anymore. Their stock dropped, I think, 50% last year. Like, there's issues at Ubisoft, and I think that needs to be fixed. But like selling off IP, I think Americans would call it a Hail Mary move. I think that's what you call it, or Hail Mary. That sounds like a drink. That's a Bloody Mary, isn't it? Yeah. But yeah, something's got to change at Ubisoft. Like, people are fed up, and maybe I'm saying this because I'm a salty Splinter Cell fan, right? You know how many times I've had to watch a summer showcase by Ubisoft, and they show off a game, and you hear those 3 lights, the goggles from Sam Fisher's, goggles, and then it's a skin for a mobile game, or maybe it's a skin for Rainbow Six, or maybe it's a challenge pack for X Defiant. Let's look at X Defiant. X Defiant was primed as the new Call of Duty killer. Now, out of the gate, when you have a game that's primed as a Call of Duty killer, it's not going to work, right? Call of Duty, it has this very satisfying gameplay loop, which I don't think... look, you had these streamers come out of the gate saying, hey, this game's going to end Call of Duty. And what are those people playing now? Call of Duty. We have to stop going at these games, calling it the something killer, just because you want some competition. And it provided no competition. X Defiant had horrible gameplay. Horrible. And if people haven't played X Defiant or ever played it before, you didn't miss out on much, right? It was trying to be Call of Duty with a kind of a visual aesthetic of Rainbow Six Siege. It's a weird game. A very weird game. And, calling these games killers, it just doesn't work. How many times have we heard a game being called a killer and it backfires? Remember Drive Club back in the day? That was called a Forza killer. I've seen every game being called a something killer and it fails. And this is one of them. X Defiant had no chance. And, that game, I believe they turned the servers off for X Defiant in June or July. But, man, that game has had its issues. Ubisoft, they need a complete restructuring from the ground up. And something like that on that level with 20,000+ developers, that's something that takes years. So which is why I don't think they can be fixed in that way. Because, again, they need years of planning to fix the entire way the company works. Crazy. Crazy, if you ask me. You know what? We still have a bunch of topics to go on. If you're enjoying it, please hit like, share, and subscribe. For some reason, YouTube is acting up today, and it doesn't share stuff out well. Anyway, was Mass Effect Andromeda a Mass Effect killer? I could talk about Mass Effect Andromeda all day. The thing is, bit of a tangent. I get asked about Mass Effect Andromeda all the time. And if you go on social media, you'll know that I've never said a bad word about Mass Effect Andromeda. But if you listen to this show, you know that I have clear problems with that game. Right? And it's a game that almost ended my favorite franchise. Which is why I refuse to call the next Mass Effect game Mass Effect 5. I'm just not doing it. Now, don't get wrong, I can't wait for the next one. But to insinuate Mass Effect Andromeda was Mass Effect 4, and it's a game that almost ended the franchise, it's kind of insulting. I could do a whole show about Mass Effect at some point, and maybe I will. Maybe I'll do like an spin-off episode where it's just about a particular game or something, but yeah. Anyway, we'll move on. You know what, I'll see if Logan's going to join because I messaged him before. Nah, he's still gone. Anyway, I think, when it comes to Xbox going forward, they have a huge lineup of games. Huge. And when it comes to Microsoft, they have major franchise. I can't talk today, by the way. I'm having to, for people that don't know, I have to jump in the show now. I'm having to write down timestamps, moderate chat, check the Twitter, all at the same time while talking. So if I sound off, that's why. Anyway, So when it comes to Microsoft, they have big pillars. They have Halo, Forza, Gears, the main three. And, when we got that Gears of War E-Day trailer last year, like, that game did not leak, right? We knew something Gears related was happening, but we didn't have any screenshots, no art, literally no leaks at all. So that was a very nicely kept secret. But we don't actually know when it's coming. There's rumors and leaks I don't really want to talk about that much because, like, look, how many years have we heard about the proposed Gears of War remaster collection? I'd say we've been talking about this for about, 4 years? Actually, probably closer to a decade. Like, it seemed to have been an ongoing rumor for the longest time, and it just never happened. But as soon as Gears of War E-Day showed last year, speculation was all up in the air. When's it happening? And, that when that trailer ended, it didn't say Series X at the end of the trailer. So, like, my prediction was originally, like, that's going to be a next-generation launch title. And, Microsoft, this generation, they didn't launch with any games. Halo was what they were betting on, and it got pushed back. I 100% believe that Gears of War E-Day, that's their next-gen launch title. Like, big style. So anyway, two of the voice actors from the Gears of War trilogy randomly tweeted out the key art around about the same time. And that's the voice actor for Dom and the voice actor for Coltrane. Just randomly tweeted the key art at like 2 a.m. or something UK time. Now, normally, I don't like to speculate about this type of thing. However, when you have two voice actors post about a specific game like that within minutes, something's up. So, if you look at previous Gears games in the past, much like Gears of War 4, and I believe they did something similar to Gears 5, we tend to get a vertical slice of cutscene and gameplay about a year and a half before the game comes out. So, my prediction, and this is basically a estimated guess, I 100% think that this year at Xbox's Summer Showcase in June, we're going to see a Gears of War E-Day vertical slice, which will have, cutscene and gameplay, because remember, they've said multiple times that what we saw last year was 100% in-engine. Apparently running on a Series X or Series X-centric hardware, apparently. But, like, I think that's what we're going to see this year. Because you don't have two voice actors randomly tweet that out of nowhere without warning. And there's no other news about Gears in the air, right? There's been talk that will these games show up at Future Game Show? I think Future Game Show on the 20th, it's going to be a fun watch, but I don't think it's going to be something you see first-party Microsoft titles like that. Gears of War is too big, and it's been too long since we've had a brand new Gears of War title, to the point where they can wait till their Summer Showcase. Gears of War is a big enough franchise, they don't have to talk about it just yet. Now, considering we have waited so long for Gears, and if I remember correctly, the last piece of Gears of War content we got outside of Tactics was Gears of War Hive Busters in November 2020 alongside the new console. And for people that haven't played it, Hive Busters is one hell of an expansion. You have brand new characters in a tropical setting. Weirdly enough, I always thought that a tropical setting wouldn't work in Gears. That expansion clearly proves me wrong, and it's a fantastic expansion. If people haven't played it, highly recommend it. In fact, that is one of the only expansions that's included in Xbox Game Pass Ultimate. So if you haven't played it, go play it. It's excellent, and the visuals in that are probably some of the best to date. I think when it comes to Gears, we'll see the vertical slice this summer, but I see that game maybe 1 to 2 years away. Again, I think it's going to be a next-gen launch title. They need a big launch title next time. They were betting on Gears with the Xbox Series X and S, and they were essentially going to launch with one title. In the past, companies have launched with 1 or 2 titles. I think the Nintendo Switch launched with 4 first-party titles. The Xbox 360 launched with also 4 first-party titles, I believe. But like this time around, they need a big heavy hitter. And it's been long enough for Gears that maybe they're going to push for that because, again, they're going to have an extra year, allegedly. But it's going to be a big time for Gears fans because if the remaster or remake collection does happen, that's going to be huge. You know? Like, you can already play these games at 4K, 60, HDR, and all that stuff. But if they are Gears of War Ultimate Edition style remakes, that's going to be a must-play collection. And the current rumor for that is it's not going to have the multiplayer. Now, for me personally, I don't play Gears of War multiplayer. I was big into the multiplayer for Gears 2. Outside of that, I just play the campaign and Horde. I do think missing Horde will be very much missed. I loved playing Horde with friends. In fact, I think it's, if anything, the most fun co-op mode in years. It's so much fun. And if people have never played Horde, I mean, you've really missed out. But yeah, that's Gears. Hopefully we do see something soon. Because again, Gears of War, we haven't had a new title in so long. Like, people are thirsty. You know? People are sick of speculating for the Gears collection. Because I remember in 2016, people were talking about a Marcus Phoenix collection. And it just never happened. Whatsoever. Which is a shame. You know what, let's talk about Starfield next. So Starfield came out in 2023. Unfortunately, it had this unnecessary wave of forced hate online. To the point where, like, no matter when or where you talked about the game, you would get hate. If people don't believe me, go to any single one of my tweets talking about Starfield. There's people just livid, angry. They say it's yet another Bethesda RPG, even though that's kind of what you want. For some reason, Siri just went off on all of my devices. Like, Starfield came out. It delivered, in my opinion. It's super fun gameplay. And by the way, they excelled that third-person camera. Like, I always try and force myself to play a Bethesda RPG in third person. Let's just say their third-person camera modes tend to be a bit slightly janky, you know. Fallout 3 is one of my favorite games of all time. Top 10. That third person camera isn't the best. You know, Skyrim in third person isn't exactly the best unless you have some sort of mod going on. And if anyone's ever tried to play Oblivion in third person, quite possibly the worst camera of all time when it comes to third person games. I don't know what they were thinking. Hilariously bad choice. But when it comes to Starfield, like, they've listened to feedback more than ever before. And you've really got to commend them for that. So when it comes to Starfield, like, they came out the gate, it was 30 frames per second. A lot of people online were saying, hey, we want 60. Then they put out the 60 FPS patch. Then they put in a bunch of different quality of life improvements, which people wanted. But, like, people were saying for the longest time, they are sick of walking across, you know, open landscapes. And some people said that, you know, the creation engine technically couldn't work with vehicles on land. And then we got the buggy, the moon buggy. And along with the expansion, I think the expansion proved that Starfield is at its strongest when you play in a handcrafted experience, when you play the handcrafted content, because that planet, it's handcrafted. It feels it. The bases, the caves, everything about it feels handcrafted. And it's a super interesting setting for that game, especially from where the story goes. But as I've been saying, like, Starfield has endless potential. Because whereas in the past, Bethesda RPGs have essentially had 1 to 2 years of expansions. And, you know, you've had smaller expansions, bigger expansions. You had the expansion in Skyrim where you could basically build houses. But you also had an expansion in Skyrim where you could travel to a completely new map and play new storylines. But all in all, I'd say it was pretty much small content compared to what Starfield's capable of, because it's a sci-fi game. You have access to hundreds, if not 1,000 planets, and the sky's the limit with that game. You know, they could basically do anything. So when Starfield came out, they said they want to support this game for years. And this year we enter in year 2 of content. We already have one expansion, and it looks like we're going to see one big expansion every single year, possibly for the foreseeable future. Enough people play this all the time that realistically, I think we could see expansions every single year for Starfield until maybe a Starfield 2 down the road. There's so much potential with that game. Like, look at No Man's Sky, right? No Man's Sky launched in a horrendous state, missing all the features people wanted and the features they promoted the game with. Whereas now, like, No Man's Sky is way beyond the game they originally promised, and they have no intention of stopping the updates and the free expansions. So with, Starfield being a single-player RPG, what's coming next? And apparently the next piece of DLC is going to be called Starborn, or something related to Starborns, and it's going to push forward with that story. Now, I think the Starborn story in Starfield was kind of short. It happens towards the end of the game. Story-wise, it makes sense. But I think with where the story was going, and then what happens before you go into the Unity, they can basically do anything. We don't know much about the Starborns. We do know about the whole going to different universes thing. Like, there's people online. There's a Starfield gamer on Twitter called J-Duke. That guy loves Starfield. And, like, I swear I've seen him post in the past. Like, someone's been to a universe where, like, everyone in that universe is the same character. It's just all, like, weird things can happen in different universes, because I've only been through the Unity once, right? This guy and a lot of other guys have been through, like, dozens of times. So, like, Starfield is a big game, but, like, there's things in that game that most people haven't even seen. Like, they came up with so many different possibilities. Like, what they can do with DLC in the future, again, the sky's the limit. And I think that's the most exciting thing about Starfield, is that the potential they have for storytelling going forward is crazy. When it comes to planets and stuff, like, they never say specifically in the game there's X amount of cities. In the galaxy they've explored so far. Like, they can keep coming out with cities, brand new handcrafted planets, because, again, they've listened to feedback. Their biggest thing with Starfield, they keep listening to feedback. And one of the biggest pieces of feedback with Starfield, Shattered Space, was that it's a handcrafted expansion. It feels handcrafted, and people loved it. So I personally think that the next piece of DLC we get with this quote-unquote Starborn expansion, I think we're going to see way more handcrafted content when it comes to planets and cities. Because, look, I think it's cool being able to go to Starfield and just go to a random moon that no one else has stepped foot on and explore. It's super cool, and I love that. But when you go to a city in Starfield, it feels alive. You see other characters wandering around doing their own thing. You see different quests popping up, and so many different side quests can pop up. Like, when you're in the what do you call it? The city that's on the city on the sea, Neon, I think it was called. Like, when you walk through this city, there's neon lights everywhere. It's got a very cyberpunk vibe. And, like, as you're walking through that city, there's so many different side quests that just randomly pop up as you're walking through the town. It's super cool, and I think that's one of their big strong suits when it comes to this, is that the world feels alive. So when you get quests presented to you like that, like, it's so good. I do think it's a shame that, whenever people talk about Starfield, there's the weird wave of hate. If people don't like it, just don't play it. It's another Bethesda RPG. If you go into a new Bethesda RPG and you expect something that isn't a Bethesda RPG, I don't know what to say. People might not know, I started Fallout 4 properly last year, and I've loved my experience with it. Like, granted, I think Fallout 3's main story is better, but Fallout 4, it's side content, it's open world. Like, honestly, one of my favorite gameplay experiences of the past 10 years is actually Fallout 4. Right? Playing that last year, and I still have to finish the game, and I still have the expansions, and, like, one of my friends who's obsessed with Fallout, like adores Fallout 4 and talks about the expansions in the game a lot. Like, and that's kind of my experience with Starfield. Like, I'm loving the game. I do take breaks from open world games a lot, but like I love my time with the game. I think I put 120 hours into it, and I'm probably going to put way more into it. Starfield is an exciting game, and as a sci-fi fan, let me tell you, I love the fact that we have a NASA-centric RPG, which we don't really have many of. Like, if you're watching on YouTube right now, you'll know that there's a Mass Effect video in the background, right? I talk about that game or those games all the time. I love that universe. Maybe a little bit too much. But, like, that universe, those characters, that setting, I love. But we don't have more realistic setting sci-fi games. Not really. I like to call Starfield the Interstellar of games. Whereas you have something like Mass Effect, which leans more towards a Star Trek or Star Wars. You have Starfield, which is more like Interstellar, more realistic, more gritty, more NASA undertones, and it just works. I really like that. I just saw in chat, there was a lot of negativity around Fallout 4. I don't actually understand why there was negativity around Fallout 4. For people that don't know, I bought the collector's edition at launch. I have the collector's bobblehead that was only available at the game where you pre-ordered it. Came with like the Vault 101 t-shirt, and like the game came out. I was so excited. I literally had my phone in the Pip-Boy ready to play, and then I was introduced to the crafting system in Fallout 4, and it was too much for me. I was like, I can't do this. I had like a little miniature OCD episode where I was like, I can't do it. So I literally uninstalled the game. And then you fast forward 10 years, 9 years at that point, last year, where my friend had been telling me for years, is like, do not let the crafting thing bother you. You don't have to touch it. So me being as stubborn as I am, didn't play the game for 9 years. I played it last year, still playing it, and it's phenomenal. I'm loving my experience with Fallout 4, and no, I barely have to touch the crafting. So I've had this really amazing game sitting there for 9 years, which I could have played the whole time. And yeah, my God, I hate crafting in video games. Hate it, absolutely hate it with a passion. Fallout 4. I know I'm on a bit of a tangent today, but like Fallout 4, when you first leave the vault in that game, being introduced to the open wasteland, like I haven't felt like that since I did when I was in Fallout 3. Right? I think Fallout 3 is the best Fallout game, just for its story alone. Like, is its gameplay a bit janky? Yeah. Is its visuals a bit off because the whole map is a combination of yellow, grey, and green all at the same time? But the story in that game, it's phenomenal. Everything about that game, I just love. And, with Fallout 4, like, it's nice to have a map with colour. You have a blue sky. You have blue and orange buildings. You have enemies that look very distinct from each other. You have characters that wear clothes that don't just look like they're made of, like, paint. Like, Fallout 4's world feels very lived in, and it's not as static as Fallout 3. And I'll never understand the hate for 4. Is its main story for Fallout 4? I don't want to say disappointing. It's just not as good as 3. But Bethesda RPGs, man, like, I think Bethesda RPGs are just fun to play. I may talk about Mass Effect all the time, but there's something very satisfying and comfortable about a Bethesda RPG experience. While we're talking about Bethesda RPGs, the Oblivion Remake. Now, to get this out of the way, because I get it, people are sick of speculation all the time. However, this isn't really speculating. So for people that don't know, about a year and a half ago, during the FTC court case, someone sent through the wrong documents, and it had a bunch of Bethesda's games with release windows planned. Obviously, this stuff was put back because of all the lockdowns. But every other game that was on this list has came out basically in order. And one of these games is the Oblivion Remake. Excuse me. Is the Oblivion Remake. And allegedly we are going to get it by July or August. And like this game, I know some people might not think this, but this game's going to be a massive deal. You know, Skyrim came out in November 2011, and it's the only Elder Scrolls an entire generation of people know about. Right? It's the game they played as a kid, and when it got its Xbox One and PlayStation 4 port, it's the only game they replayed. And then when it got its Xbox Series X enhancement, they played it again there. And it's like, that's their only Elder Scrolls game. I'm sure people listening, like, you played Oblivion back in the day. And let me tell you, Oblivion is magical, right? There's the dungeons in that Elder Scrolls game, some of the best in the entire franchise. You have amazing main story. The main story in Oblivion is better than Skyrim by a large margin. Like, Oblivion's story is its strong suit. And then you also have Oblivion Gates. Oblivion Gates kind of act like dungeons, and they are scattered all throughout the map. You step through, you get a loading screen, and boom, you're basically in hell. And it's just a really cool experience. And, you know, yes, you can play it in backwards compatible on Xbox at 4K 60, HDR, 16 times anisotropic filtering. And that game has aged pretty badly. It's aged like a chicken sandwich left on a doorstep during summer. It looks pretty rough. Like, I put it like this: if people have Oblivion, the 360 version, installed on your Xbox, after the show's finished, load it up, just walk out into the woods and look down at the ground. That game, and a lot of games did this back then, but it's very noticeable in Oblivion. You walk over some grass and look down, the game doesn't have grass. It has green paint on the ground that's basically used as a grass texture. And even in 2006, when my mind was blown stepping out into the open world from the cave for the first time, or from the underneath the city, and like I was like, this is amazing. This amazing, huge open world fantasy game. And then when I saw that grass texture, I burst out laughing. Like, okay, like, open world's amazing, but like grass was something they couldn't really do properly then. But anyway, this game is going to be something I think a lot of people love. Like, this game potentially has millions of copies sold when it's out. So we got a bunch of new details for what's going to be in the remake, and I think a lot of people are going to be very happy, and I think there's going to be a very small vocal minority online. It depends on which side of the fence you are. That will be slightly disappointed with one particular aspect of this game. So, this game has been fully built from the ground up using Unreal Engine 5. Beautiful, brand new visuals, which, let's just say that's something Elder Scrolls kind of needed. I love Oblivion. It's a game I can talk about all day, but let's just say that it's aged pretty badly. Visuals alone, it's pretty bad. But anyway, it's going to have full-on, remade Unreal Engine 5 visuals, great detail, quality of life improvements, which I think they could actually go a long way with that game, because loading screens in between the open world and the Oblivion gates, they can narrow that down to basically zero now. In fact, with the way SSDs work, I assume that there will be no loading, and you'll just walk through into an Oblivion gate, and you'll just be there. At least that's how it would be nice. You know, it'd be nice to work that way. Anyway, it's going to have quality of life improvements. It's going to have gameplay improvements, which, if you've played Oblivion, Oblivion, that game kind of needs some of that love. You know, the first person combat is a bit stiff. It's going to have bug fixes from the original. It looks like it could be the ultimate remake of Oblivion. We'll be getting some more information soon, but the downside of this, and for me, this isn't a downside because I don't play games with mods, or shall I say, I don't use mods in games. Not really. And apparently, due to complications of remaking the entire game in Unreal Engine 5 while running in the Creation Engine at the same time, apparently the game won't be moddable at launch. Now, for me, that isn't actually a bad thing, right? I wasn't going to play the game with mods anyway. So to me, it's not really disappointing news. It's just news. Now, I know there's a lot of people that they love modding the hell out of games, but for me, originally, like, I want to play the developer's version of the game, their vision, and then maybe later on play around with mods. And who knows, maybe it's something they'll add post-launch if it does well. And I obviously do think it's going to do well because, this is an Elder Scrolls game. But I think a lot of people are going to be happy with this. Again, we haven't had a new Elder Scrolls experience since, 2011. We've had multiple ports since. And you've had the Elder Scrolls Online, but playing in that world with other people just feels weird, depending on who you are. But yeah, I think a lot of people are going to be very happy with the Elder Scrolls Oblivion Remake. And again, we should be hearing about this soon. I think it's going to be weird for timing for Microsoft because if this game does release by July, they essentially have to announce it in the next month. It's a remake, but it's going to sell millions of copies, and it's something that they can market for quite a while. And honestly, maybe I'm in the minority here. I do hope this gets a physical release with a collector's edition. Right? I think Elder Scrolls is something that should have a collector's edition, and this being a Bethesda game specifically, I think we could say that because even Doom, the Dark Ages, has a collector's edition, and even though this is a remake, I bet a lot of people would go out their way to buy a physical edition, especially if it's a collector's edition. Now, let's see if I can find this. I'm trying to find the details on the Oblivion Remake because, again, I'm trying to moderate, chat, do everything at the same time, and do timestamps. But look, Microsoft's first-party studios, they are absolutely stacked this year, The Oblivion Remake, which is going to be announced soon. Towerborne is just around the corner. Doom the Dark Ages launches in May. South of Midnight launches in April. We just had Avowed. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 and 4 launches in, I think that's June, I believe. And, you have Call of Duty coming later this year. And The Outer Worlds 2. So, it's an absolutely stacked year. I think a lot of people are going to be very happy. But, yeah, what can I say? Especially for RPG fans. The fact that they're going to continue to support Avowed and put out Fable next year and put out The Outer Worlds. I don't know how people are going to be able to keep up with all these games, especially if you're like me and you mainly play RPGs. But, yeah. You know what? Trying to see if I can find any more details on the Oblivion Remake. You know what? We'll maybe get back to this before we close out the show. So this is another topic I've been asked about recently, and that's Death Stranding 2. Look, Death Stranding 2, those screenshots that went live, are absolutely stunning, right? Death Stranding 1 on Xbox, it's a gorgeous-looking game. In fact, it's probably one of the best-looking games on the console. They did a really good job with that game. Ninja Gaiden 4. I keep forgetting that they published that this year, but yeah, that's also going to be in Game Pass as well. But yeah, I think Xbox, they really need to go out of their way and time these games perfectly because, excuse me, I'll get to Death Stranding 2 in a minute. Microsoft's year is so packed, and things like GTA is still to come out later this year. Again, Outer Worlds 2 doesn't have a release window at all. So these developers, that's why you keep seeing trailers for video games and say vague 2025. We just don't know. Unfortunately, the entire industry is waiting on GTA to get its details, its release date details. I mean, who knows when that's going to happen, but I think that one of the things you can bank on Rockstar is that they can come out on a random day at a random time and announce the game whichever way they want. They could come out tomorrow and say, hey, this game launches October 7th and announce it with a GIF, and it'll still sell 20 million copies because they can get away with it, you know. But you know, that's Rockstar; they'll get away with murder at this point. I'm trying not to rant about Rockstar much this show because it feels like every podcast for the past 4 weeks I've ranted about them, and I try not to do that. You know, I don't like to put down people's excitement for a new GTA game, but again, that's a podcast for another day. But yeah, let's get back to Death Stranding. Oh, you know what? I actually found the list of details when it comes to what do you call it? Oblivion. Again, if it sounds like I'm struggling to talk today, I'm having to moderate, write notes, timestamp during the podcast. So anyway, these are some of the details for Oblivion Remake, and I'll go over this before we get into Death Stranding 2. The HUD is meant to be easy to understand for new players in Oblivion Remake. Now, the HUD in the original Oblivion is kind of janky. You know, at the bottom corner where it would show you your health, your mana, and your stamina, basically in the same corner. It would kind of throw people off. But it's good that they actually, narrowing that down. I'm guessing they're pretty much going to make the UI a lot like Skyrim's. Skyrim's UI is pretty sleek. People know what's going on with it. It's a good way to go. The way stamina is going to work in the game, it's going to be less frustrating for new players, and it's going to be knocked down less when it's depleted. Players are going to be knocked down less when depleted. Fuck me. Sorry for swearing. Literally all over the place today. Now, the stamina in the first game, Oblivion was the fourth one. I ran out of stamina all the time in that game. All the time. I went with a sword and shield class, and it was annoying. Like, I praise Oblivion constantly, but the gameplay was really held back in that game. It was clunky, it was unsatisfying, all that stuff. Hit detection is meant to be improved upon in combat. So if you've played the first game, I keep calling it the first game. I think it was because my first Elder Scrolls game. The hit detection in Oblivion is terrible. You know, if you go into a dungeon and you try and fight a skeleton in the dark, it's pretty difficult. It's not satisfying. And I think people just want more smoother combat. And look, people might joke about Skyrim, but its combat is pretty precise and it's satisfying. Blocking is meant to be more fluent in the remake, a bit more like the Souls games, and that's a good thing to me. If you've played Oblivion, you'll know that its gameplay is rough. Blocking in that game barely works. You can't see what's going on a lot, and when your shield is covering half your face, you don't know what you're kind of shielding yourself from. So if they can make it a bit more like Elden Ring when it comes to blocking, that'll work really well. Sneaking, the sneak icon is improved upon in this game and actually highlighted when enemies can see you or not. So if you've played Oblivion or Skyrim, you'll know that when you sneak up behind an enemy, you just see a picture of an eye, and then it just opens up when they can see you. I think that's a bit of an archaic way to actually do stealth, especially considering we're used to so many games, so many Ubisoft games, so many open world stealth games where you basically have a bar that increases over time depending on whether an enemy can see you or not. That's the way to go about it. The game's going to have modern improved third-person and first-person archery. So if you've played as an archer in Oblivion, let's just say you'd probably be better off aiming with your feet, because that game is the horrendous gameplay. I don't know how people went through that original game as an archer, but God bless them. God bless their little souls. But yeah, Oblivion, it sounds like its remake's going to be really good. I think, if I've said in the past, I don't really think most games need a remake, but that's one of the few games from the 360 generation where I'd actively think it badly needs it. It badly needs it. You know what? Before we close out the show, I'll talk about Death Stranding quickly, which I felt like I was going to go over several times, but I keep stopping. Death Stranding was announced for PlayStation, I think 2 years ago, and we finally got like 10 minutes of gameplay last week, and like it's a gorgeous looking game. It's photorealistic, much like the first game, and it's probably going to be Kojima's most ambitious game to date. Now, if you look at all the trailers and the promotional art, it doesn't actually say exclusive on the art. PlayStation, they do put in their trailers a lot, exclusive at the bottom of the promotional art. Death Stranding 2 doesn't have any of that. Kojima, he bought the IP from Sony. He completely owns it now. So I think this is probably going to be a 1-year timed exclusivity. Because if it was going to come out the same day as PlayStation, I'm guessing we would know by now. And considering what this game's going to be like for PlayStation, I think it's going to do pretty well. Now, it is weird because it's obviously going to sell well. The first game did, but its perception is weird, I've seen people refer to the sequel as DoorDash 2, which is pretty funny, even though I do clearly like Death Stranding. I think the game's going to be completely fine. I do think, the year wait for Xbox and, PC, it'll be annoying, but I don't think it's going to be the 5 years for the first game, because again, they'll own it. But it is interesting that, I do think, Death Stranding 2 will be on Xbox quicker than the first. And, look, when we're done with the show, just go to any of the promotional art on Twitter or on, Threads or Blue Sky. There's no mention of exclusivity at all, which is weird because even if a game is timed exclusive, it normally does say on the art. So, who knows? And, look, I'm on Chapter 8, I believe, in Death Stranding, and I'll say this. I will 100% get the sequel. 100%. I'm already sold on it. Do I know what's going on? Absolutely not. Does the game make any sense? I don't think so. But I'm hooked. And I think that this is going to be one of those games where I think more people need to maybe give it a chance, because it is a weird game. You walk around a lot. You're carrying parcels. You're basically an Amazon delivery dude that turns the internet back on. That is essentially what you do in that game. But it works, even though it shouldn't. But yeah, what can I say? I think that, if you listen to me right now and Death Stranding sounds remotely interesting, next time you see it on sale on Xbox Live, it's usually 50% off. Maybe give it a chance. I got it with my Microsoft reward points, and let me tell you, I'm happy I did. I never had any intention of playing the first game at all, and, why not? It was free for us, and I really enjoyed it. I'm happy I gave it a chance. And I think, if more people would give these games a chance, you'll discover something different, because I should not like this game. Right? I shouldn't like this game because you spend a lot of time walking. You go through these massive landscapes, sometimes trying to drive vehicles over rocks and, mountains and stuff, and, the physics just doesn't work. I'm enjoying it, Maybe it's the fact that I played Mass Effect a lot, that I can just drive vehicles over uneven terrain. It's the Mako fan in me. But, Death Stranding, what an interesting game. What an interesting game. Now, it will be interesting to see if it does come to Xbox maybe this year, because, again, no mention of exclusivity period. And if I remember correctly, there's been games in the past that they weren't able to advertise that they were coming to Xbox, but they did anyway. If I remember correctly, Destiny 1, it was coming to Xbox, but none of the marketing could say it was. I believe the same thing happened for Diablo 3, the Xbox One version. They couldn't say it was coming to the console. It just randomly showed up the same day as the other platforms. So it's going to be a weird one, to say the least. It's going to be weird. I think, before we close out the show, I think that the whole exclusivity thing, all third-party publishers, they're moving away from it. Square Enix has talked about more games coming to Xbox. These games are obviously going to be on the Switch 2 as well. All these publishers, they're moving away from exclusivity. The new Silent Hill looks super cool. It's going to be creepy, and I don't know how that's going to be available in some countries, but it's good that it's coming to Xbox. Will it be on Switch 2? Probably. But like developers, like the writing's on the wall. Like the money they get for exclusivity, it isn't worth it. You know, you're gonna have Final Fantasy in the future come to Xbox and Switch 2 day one and PC. You're gonna have Final Fantasy 16 and 7 on Xbox at some point this year, next year. Like it's happening, and you know I have seen the argument go back and forth online. You know, do exclusives benefit consumers and stuff like? At the end of the day, like I'm happy with the platform I prefer. I'm getting more games than ever. In fact, there's more Japanese games coming to Xbox than ever before. So, like, when it comes to multi-platform stuff, I'm completely happy all that stuff's ending. I should say the exclusive stuff's ending because these games are coming, you know? And I think, you know, in a time where people are concerned about third-party games coming, like, there's literally more games coming to Xbox than ever before. It's a win-win. Yeah, like Silent Hill F really sticks out. By the way, I've really been wanting to talk about this game ever since it was shown off. I do think gore has been very much reserved when it comes to games online. Like, yeah, you can play Gears of War and saw someone in half. Yeah, you can play Mortal Kombat and rip someone's skeleton out of the throat, basically. And if people haven't seen the finisher moves for the T-1000 in Mortal Kombat 1, let me tell you, if you're a fan of Terminator 2, you're going to be a fan of this. It's gory, very Terminator 2 stuff, lots of Easter eggs there, but yeah, Silent Hill F looks different. And the fact that you're not going to have ranged weapons, right? It could have just been another Resident Evil 2 or, you know, Silent Hill type game where you have a gun and you circle strafe around a slow enemy. Maybe you back them into a corner or you try and bottleneck enemies into a doorway. No, you're going to be using axes and stuff, which is a cool time. You know, by the way, before I close out the show, like it's been such a good year for games when it comes to all the news of games coming. Like this wasn't even a topic, and it just reminded us. Space Marine 3 got confirmed. I've talked about Space Marine 2 basically every week online since it came out. Like that game, I feel lucky that it exists. It's a very gritty 360 style game with super amazing visuals, but it has more enemies on screen than basically every game in the past decade combined. Like there's so much tech in that game that is underappreciated. The gameplay is super fun. When you get a jetpack in Space Marine 2, you're going to feel like a god. You feel so powerful. And that game was so successful out of the gate that it changed the studio. It changed the entire company and how they make games. It sold faster than any other game they made before. And it's the most nichest, nerdiest sci-fi franchise of all time. Warhammer 40k. Right? Most people that played that game, they'd never played a Warhammer game before. They never read a Warhammer book. Do you think they ever painted these little figurines and fight little other figurines and other armies on someone's table? They never did that. But they loved Space Marine 2. They liked that feeling of a power trip. And we're going to get that with Warhammer 40k Space Marine 3. And they said they're going to continue to support the first game. The first game still gets free co-op content and maps. Like Saber Interactive, they have to be one of the best in the industry. Maybe I do praise them a lot on this channel, but screw it. And it is a Focus Entertainment game. They are the best third-party publisher. But yeah, it's an amazing time for games coming out this year. It really is. Like Tales of Annihilation was announced about a month ago or so. Like there's so many interesting games coming out this year that if anyone complains, they mustn't like games. They mustn't like games at all. And you know, if you watch the videos on my channel, right, I make videos about upcoming games. Like I have a video coming out soon for April and May and so on and so forth. Like every single month, I get 1 or 2 replies saying, "You know what? None of these games for me. These games are mid." Like the last video I put out was the top 20 biggest games coming to Xbox this year. Do you know there's games in basically every genre in that video except racing games? There's no racing games in that video. But like the amount of replies I get all the time is saying this list is mid, there's no good games there. Like, I honestly don't get why some people consider themselves gamers. Because like, if you limit yourself to just one kind of genre, you're missing out on all sorts of stuff. Too many people just look at a game trailer and call it mid, and not take any sensory data in. They just want to be a troll or a fanboy. It's tiring. You know what? We've been going on for a little over 2 hours now, and I've been doing this solo. Everyone in chat has been amazing. Again, Logan couldn't make it, so this was actually planned to be a short show since it's just me talking, and it feels like my throat has been washed out with razor blades. Anyway, both of us will be back next Tuesday for a new episode of All Things Xbox podcast. I have more videos coming out in the coming weeks. I actually have a bunch of new things planned for the channel. I also have on-camera content coming soon, which I'm trying to find out how to make a bloody shelf work in my background. Again, that's a long story for another day. Tip to people, do not buy the glass cabinets from IKEA. You know these things, bit of a rant. You know these things that arrive in like these flat pack boxes that you make yourself? You know, hey, this shelf, you know, it shows up in your house in like 80 pieces, which you put together yourself. You get these steel bars, glass panels, a bunch of screws, maybe some wheels or stands. Well, you can't exactly send these back in a million pieces. Horrendously built things, just putting it that way. But anyway, have a bunch of cool things come to the channel. Also, Let's Plays and stuff. Basically, going from a podcast a week and 1 or 2 videos a month, I want to try and get out maybe 1 or 2 videos a week and more live streams. But hey, if you want to be entertained, hope I've got you covered. Cool stuff coming. Again, new episode of All Things Xbox podcast, same time next week. And if you live in the UK or Europe, you may notice that these podcasts are slightly earlier than usual. It's because our clocks don't go forward till the end of the month. Sorry for the inconvenience. Anyway, we're back next time, this week. You know what, before I go, if I sound like I'm stuttering all over the place, I hate having to moderate chat, write down notes, do timestamps, all of this crap all at the same time, because it's annoying. It's hard to do. It's like trying to rub your stomach and pat your head at the same time, but I've got like five different things going on. I'm also having to do my Twitter stuff at the same time. You know, I just saw in chat, do some retro reviews. I've actually been thinking about this for a while, and I actually have one in the works right now. If people want to see me review older games, because reviewing an older game is completely different to a new game, like, I would happily put reviews out for older games on the channel if they want. Just if people want that, let me know. Write in the comments down below. Again, I have a bunch of cool content coming. Hope you all enjoy it. I have a video coming soon. Podcast next week. I'm out, everybody. Hope you have a good day. Peace.